My mom left me to go on a 2-week Bali trip with her new husband. I found 12 letters and chose a new family before she even cleared customs. My name is Elowen, and when I was 15, my mother abandoned me at the airport. I still recall her careless shrug as she handed me $200 and went away with her new husband and their children. That event at Gate 24 devastated all I believed I understood about family and love. What I didn't expect was how that horrible betrayal would lead me to the truth about my background, changing my life forever. Before I tell you how I went from being abandoned at Gate 24 to discovering my true family, believe me, you'll want to hear what happened when my mother arrived to find my room completely vacant. My early childhood memories of my mother were largely cheerful. I recall weekend outings to the neighborhood park, where she would push me on the swings until my stomach fluttered with delight. On my 6th birthday, she cooked a lopsided chocolate cake and decorated our small flat with homemade paper streamers. We had little, but we had each other. And at the time, that felt plenty. Everything changed when I was 8 years old. When I got home from school one day, I found my parents sitting stiffly at opposite ends of our ancient couch. The air felt heavy with anxiety, as they said they were getting divorced. The explanation was brief, stating simply, "Sometimes adults stop loving each other," leaving me with more questions than answers. I recall weeping myself to sleep that night, clutching my teddy rabbit as the faint sounds of their disputes crept through my bedroom wall. My mother was granted primary custody, and my father quickly withdrew from my life. Weekends with him decreased from every other weekend to once a month, followed by sporadic phone conversations that were increasingly unpleasant and brief. By the time I was 10, Dad was little more than a name on my birth certificate and a distant memory. Life as a single parent was not easy. My mother worked 2 jobs to support us: waitressing during the day and cleaning office buildings at night. I grew accustomed to eating microwave dinners and entering our flat with the key I wore around my neck. Despite our financial difficulties, our routine remained rather stable. I knew the rules, what was expected of me, and how important I was to my mother. When I turned 13, everything changed again. My mother met Cassian in the restaurant where she works. He was a wealthy businessman who left generous tips and requested her section whenever he dined there. I recall the first time she mentioned him, her cheeks flushing with pleasure as she recounted his fine outfit and the way he gazed at her as if she were someone exceptional. Their romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, Cassian had proposed to my mother with a diamond ring so huge that it appeared comically out of place on her work-worn hand. Before I could get used to the thought of having a stepfather, we were moving into his large suburban mansion, complete with a pool, home theater, and more bathrooms than I could count. Cassian's 3 children from his previous marriage lived in the residence as well. Aurelia was 14, only a year older than me, and her persistent expression of disdain made me feel instantly inferior. Ronan, 12, was silent and aloof, barely noticing my presence. Leora, the youngest, was 10 years old and first the most welcome, but her goodwill rapidly faded once we were all under one roof. From the start, it was evident that I didn't fit into this pre-made household. Cassian was cordial but remote, saving his true smiles and compassion for his own kids. Cassian and my mother talked private schools, country club memberships, and vacation homes during family dinners, topics I had never heard of before. When I talked, my remarks on school or books were welcomed with polite nods before the subject returned to the stepchildren's achievements in tennis, debate club, or piano performance. What stung the most was seeing my mother alter. The woman who had previously cut coupons and shopped clearance racks suddenly spoke intelligently about designer goods and exclusive eateries. She dyed her hair, whitened her teeth, and began referring to our old life as the struggle years, with an awkward giggle if Cassian's friends were present. It was as if she was shedding her old skin, along with the portions of herself that were attached to me. I was trying to blend in with my new step-siblings. I volunteered to help Aurelia with her arithmetic homework, complimented Leora on her artwork, and inquired about Ronan's video game collection. My efforts were treated with chilly politeness at best, and blatant rejection at worst. One particularly heartbreaking recollection was overhearing Aurelia tell her friends on the phone that her father's new wife came with luggage, which included me. As summer neared, Cassian announced a family trip to Bali, 2 weeks at a luxurious resort with private villas and personal butlers. Despite the growing gap between my mother and me, I had a burst of excitement. Perhaps this trip would allow me to finally bond with my new family away from the stresses of school and daily life. My aspirations were swiftly dashed when my mother brought the stepchildren shopping for new vacation attire, but excluded me. When I inquired why, she nonchalantly stated that I already had plenty of clothes. Despite the fact that the majority of mine were from our pre-Cassian days, I decided to use the money I had earned from babysitting to purchase myself a new swimsuit, a modest blue one-piece that paled in comparison to the designer bikinis Aurelia and Leora would be carrying. A week before the trip, I overheard a troubling conversation between my mother and Cassian. They were in their bedroom, the door slightly open, unknowing that I was passing by on my way to the kitchen. "What about the arrangements for Aloan?" Cassian inquired, his tone low. "All taken care of," my mother said dismissively, making my stomach knot. "She will not be a problem." When I asked her about it later, she dismissed my worries with a casual, "Just trip details, honey. Nothing for you to worry about." The morning of our trip was filled with chaos and excitement. The house was a hive of activity as suitcases were put into Cassian's luxurious SUV. I realized my passport was not among the stack of travel paperwork on the kitchen counter. But when I reported this to my mother, she grumbled something about having it in her handbag and hurried me on. Looking back, I should have spotted the warning signs: my mother's avoidance of eye contact as we drove to the airport, the fact that no one talked about my seat assignment on the plane as they were deciding who would receive the window seats, and the fact that my suitcase was curiously smaller than everyone else's. But at 15, determined to feel I belonged to this family, I ignored the warning signs. The international terminal was a hectic jumble of passengers, rolling bags, and frantic airline employees. Cassian guided our group through the mob with practiced speed, my mother by his side, clutching her luxury handbag. Aurelia, Ronan and Leora followed closely after, their expressions filled with excitement. I followed in the back, struggling to keep up while rolling my small suitcase. When we arrived at the check-in counter, Cassian handed the airline attendant our passports and confirmation information. I observed he handed over 5 passports, not 6. I felt a knot in my gut as I saw each family member receive their boarding permits except for myself. "Excuse me," I said, moving ahead. "I think you forgot my boarding pass." The aircraft attendant seemed perplexed. "I only have 5 passengers listed for this reservation." Cassian cleared his throat. "Your mother needs to speak with you about that. We will go ahead to security." As the stepchildren and Cassian left with the luggage cart, my mother grabbed my elbow and led me to a quiet area near a gift shop. Her face bore a look I had never seen before. A curious blend of detachment and faint displeasure. "Listen, Elowen," she continued, her tone unusually calm. "There has been a change of plans. You are not coming with us to Bali." The words struck me like a physical blow. "What? Why? Did I do something wrong?" She groaned and looked across to Cassian and the children waiting in the security line. "Cassian thinks this should be a trip just for us and his kids. A chance to really bond as a family." "But I am family too," I shouted, my voice shaking. "I am your daughter." "Do not make a scene," she said, rummaging inside her purse. She took out a bundle of cash and put it into my hand. "Here is $200. You can figure it out. Just take an Uber home." I looked at the money in surprise. "You are leaving me at the airport alone? I do not even have a house key." She gave a careless shrug that would haunt my dreams for years. "Mrs. Voss next door has the spare. You will be fine. You are mature for your age." Tears welled in my eyes as the whole gravity of what was happening hit me. "Mom, please. You cannot do this." "Cassian is waiting," she added, looking nervously at the security checkpoint. "This vacation is important for our future. Alowen, sometimes we all have to make sacrifices." "A sacrifice would be giving up a concert ticket or postponing a shopping trip," I responded, my amazement giving way to wrath. "This is abandonment." She startled at the term, but immediately gathered herself. "Do not be so dramatic. It is just 2 weeks. The refrigerator is stocked, and I left money for pizza in the kitchen drawer." She leaned in and gave me a brief, dry kiss on the forehead. "I will call you when we land." With that, she turned and walked away, her high heels clicking on the airport tile as she returned to Cassian and the stepchildren. I watched in startled silence as they passed through security, my mother never looking back. Aurelia caught my attention quickly and smirked before they vanished from sight. I stood motionless, the $200 clasped in my quivering fist. Around me, the airport's typical rhythm continued. Travelers rushing to their destinations, families hugging farewell, and airline announcements resounding overhead. However, when the gravity of my mother's deception became clear to me, time seemed to stand still. As I slumped onto a nearby bench, hot tears streamed down my face without warning. Several passers-by gave me interested or concerned looks, but no one stopped. In an airport, a crying teenager was just another part of the scenery, easily noticed and quickly forgotten. I spent the next hour in a fog, staring at the departure board as their flight status moved from boarding to departed. Each update added a new twist to the story. I tried phoning my mother's cell phone several times, but the calls went directly to voicemail. My messages were delivered but stayed unanswered. Having fun at the airport, I finally texted, fury briefly overpowering pain. Hope abandoning your child was worth the first-class upgrade. No response arrived. Not that I anticipated one. By now my mother would have settled into her seat, probably sipping champagne next to Cassian, pleased to be free of the burdens of her prior life, including me. As the afternoon progressed into nighttime, my situation got more hazardous. An airport security officer approached me as I sat in the food court, drinking a beverage I had purchased to explain taking up the table. "Everything okay, miss?" he said, his expression a mix of suspicion and worry. "You have been here for several hours now." "I am waiting for my ride," I lied, avoiding his gaze. "They got stuck in traffic." He appeared doubtful, but nodded and moved on, warning me not to leave my suitcase unattended. I felt another wave of embarrassment flood over me. How could I admit that my own mother had left me? The words remained in my throat, pulled back by a mix of humiliation and lingering loyalty. As the evening throng dispersed and airport businesses began to close their security gates, the truth of my situation became impossible to ignore. The $200 would not last very long. Even if I made it back home, I'd be alone for 2 weeks, with no transportation and minimal cash. I found myself in the airport bathroom, spraying cold water on my puffy face and attempting to devise a strategy. The girl in the mirror appeared to be a stranger, her eyes crimson and disturbed. At that instant, I realized that something basic had changed. The invisible link that had kept me connected to my mother, the fundamental belief that she would always protect me, had been permanently broken. My mother had walked away 6 hours ago. I'd moved from bench to bench in the terminal, seeing families and couples go on journeys together. Each passing hour increased my sensation of solitude. My phone battery was running low, adding to my already stressful scenario. Around 8 p.m., I went to a still-open airport restaurant. I sat at the counter and ordered the lowest item on the menu, a side of fries, to stretch my restricted budget. The waitress, a woman with gentle eyes and a name tag reading Soraya, brought my dinner and then lingered to observe my face. "Are you okay, honey?" she inquired, her voice soothing. "You look like you have been crying." I tried a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I am fine. Just a long day." She did not press any further, but returned a few minutes later with a chocolate milkshake that I had not requested. "On the house," she added with a wink. "Whatever is going on, sugar and chocolate never hurt." Her simple compassion nearly broke me. I thanked her despite the lump in my throat and ate slowly while scanning through my phone contacts, looking for someone who could help. My selection of alternatives was disappointingly short. Most of my pals from before the relocation had moved on, and I hadn't met many new ones in Cassian's area. I tried texting 2 of my mother's friends, women who had been in our life before Cassian. One did not respond, and the other left a quick message indicating she was out of town. My mother's former support network appeared to have been completely abandoned when she went on to her new life, just like our modest apartment and cheap groceries. As I went through my contacts, a name stood out and made my heart skip a beat. Dad. I hadn't communicated with him in over 3 years. Our final conversation was a short, unpleasant phone call on my 12th birthday. After that, he seemed to vanish. My mother had always hinted that he didn't want to be a part of my life since he had a new family that came first. "Your father has moved on," she would respond when I inquired about him. "Some men just are not cut out for parenthood." I focused on his contact information, my thumb hovering over the call button. What if he rejects me too? What if my mother was speaking the truth and he didn't want anything to do with me? The notion of another abandonment was agonizing. I returned to the airport facilities and locked myself into a stall for solitude. I rehearsed what I was going to say, trying out various openings. "Hi Dad, it is Alawan. I know it has been a while." "No, it's too casual." "Hello. This is Alawan. I am sorry to bother you, but I am in trouble." Better, but still not perfect. In the end, necessity triumphed over pride. With shaky fingers I pressed the call button and held my breath until the phone rang. Once, twice, or 3 times. I was about to hang up when a deep voice responded. "Hello?" The sound of his voice, so familiar yet foreign, temporarily deprived me of words. "Hello, is anyone there?" he repeated. "Dad," I finally said, my voice small and hesitant. There was a pause, followed by, "Elowen? Is that you, sweetheart?" The anxiety in his speech struck a chord with me. "Dad, I need your help," I pleaded. And then the entire narrative came out in a blur of words broken by sobs. The remarriage, the relocation, the airport, the $200. By the end, I was hardly lucid. "She left you alone at the airport." His tone had shifted, with a steely edge replacing the first disbelief. "Where are you now?" "Which airport?" I informed him, half expecting him to offer to contact a social services organization or wire me money for a motel. "Stay exactly where you are," he stated sternly. "I am coming to get you myself. It will take me about 3 hours to reach you. Can you stay safe until then?" "You are coming here?" I inquired, my voice trembling with incredulity. "You do not have to do that. Maybe you could just help me get home." "And Elowen," interjected him. "I am coming to get you. Find the customer service desk for the airline your mother was flying with. Tell them your situation. I will call ahead and make sure they take care of you until I arrive." After he hung up, I stayed in the bathroom stall for a few minutes, trying to figure out what had happened. My father, who I had thought had little interest in me, was dropping everything to help me. It seemed too wonderful to be true, and my life's failures had taught me to be skeptical of hope. Nonetheless, I followed his directions and approached the customer service desk, my heart in my throat. To my amazement, the airline employees were immediately empathetic. They led me to a private waiting area, served me a sandwich and juice, and promised me that they would look after me until my father arrived. "Unfortunately, this happens more often than you would think," the customer support manager said gently. "Parents changing plans at the last minute, leaving kids to fend for themselves." The 3-hour wait seemed long and weird. I alternated between optimism, anxiety, and tiredness. What happens if my father does not show up? What if he did but disliked having to save me? What if this was all a setup for another rejection? My thoughts turned to the few memories I had of him before the divorce. Teaching me to ride a bike in the park, his steady hand on the seat as I wobbled forward, reading bedtime stories in a different voice for each character, and a Christmas morning when he built me a dollhouse, his face lighting up with delight. If he loved me, why had he left my life? Why hadn't he fought to see me? The questions swarmed in my fatigued thoughts as the minutes passed. As I was starting to doze off in the uncomfortable airport chair, a voice came over the PA system. "Attention please, will Elowen Williams please come to the information desk? Elowen Williams to the information desk please." My heart rushed into my throat as I packed my small suitcase and followed an airline employee who had arrived to accompany me. Instead of going to the main terminal, we proceeded via a series of hallways and security gates until we arrived at what appeared to be a VIP terminal area. "Your father has arranged for you to meet him here," the staffer said as we reached the glass doors leading to the tarmac. That's when I spotted it. A beautiful private jet with stairs leading down from its entrance. And heading down those steps was a tall man dressed in a business suit. His familiar visage made my breath catch. My father appeared different than I remembered. His dark hair was now streaked with silver at the temples, and he held himself with a confidence I had not seen since childhood, but as his eyes met mine, they were just as I remembered. Friendly and crinkled at the corners. For a time, we both froze, taking each other in from a distance. Then he strode forward, closing the distance between us in seconds. He stopped just short of embracing me, hesitation on his face. "Elowen," he said, his voice full of emotion, "I cannot believe it is really you." I wasn't sure what to say or do. Part of me wanted to fall into his arms like the little girl who used to meet him at the door. Another part, the devastated youngster who had felt abandoned by both parents, withheld information. He seems to detect my uncertainty. "I am so sorry," he grumbled gently, "for everything. For not being there, for not fighting harder to stay in your life." Something in his genuineness penetrated my defenses. The tears I thought were gone hours ago resurfaced with new vigor. "She said you did not want to see me anymore," I gasped out. "That you had moved on." His face clouded. "That was never true. Not for a single day." He tentatively opened his arms, and this time I didn't hesitate. Stepping into his hug and releasing years of pent-up sadness onto his shoulder. We stood there for a few minutes, both overtaken with emotion. When we finally parted ways, he kept one arm around my shoulders and walked me to the waiting plane. "Let us get you out of here," he asked gently. "We can talk properly once we are in the air." The cabin of the private plane was unlike anything I had ever seen. Plush leather seats, polished oak tables, and gentle lighting produced a sense of peaceful luxury. A flight attendant greeted us cheerfully and offered me a variety of beverages and food. As we took our seats facing each other, I couldn't help but look at my father in astonishment. "Is this your plane?" He smiled, a tinge of discomfort on his face. "The company's, technically. I am the CEO of Horizon Tech now." "CEO?" I repeated in surprise. My mother had always represented him as struggling financially, barely able to pay child support. "It has been a successful few years," he replied simply before leaning forward, his expression serious. "Elowen, I need you to know something. I have been trying to contact you for years. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, phone calls, all of it. When your mother remarried and moved, I lost track of you completely. I hired private investigators who could not find your new address. I filed motions with the court that were somehow lost or delayed." My thoughts reeled as the implications of what he was saying hit home. "She kept you away from me on purpose?" He nodded, pain visible in his eyes. "I have been sending child support and additional money every month since the divorce. Money you never saw." I remembered the secondhand clothes, the times we ate ramen noodles for days on end, and my mother's continuous concerns about money problems. "We were always broke," I muttered. "She said you barely paid child support." My father opened his briefcase and took out a folder, offering it to me. Inside were copies of cashed checks, court paperwork, and records of attempted interactions, all carefully arranged by date. The evidence for his attempts and my mother's lie was overwhelming. "I do not show you this to hurt you," he stated kindly. "But you deserve to know the truth." As the jet took off, transporting me away from the airport where my mother had abandoned me, I felt curiously weightless, as if I was shedding years of misunderstandings and manipulations with each mile. My father said that he now lives in Seattle and runs the technology company he helped start shortly after the divorce. What began as a small startup had evolved into a big player in the market, earning him unexpected success. "I kept your room ready," he replied with a hint of embarrassment in his voice. "All these years, just in case." The flight flew by as we started the delicate process of getting to know each other again. There were awkward pauses and intense feelings, but beneath it all was a river of true connection that felt both fresh and old. When we landed, there was a car waiting to drive us to his house. I plastered my face against the window as we drove through wealthy neighborhoods before turning into a private road that led up a hillside. The first house I saw was breathtaking, a modern edifice of glass and stone placed on a rock overlooking the ocean. "Home sweet home," my father remarked, observing my reaction with pleasure and fear. "I hope you will be comfortable here." A woman named Mireille met us at the door. I tensed up, wondering whether this was my father's wife, but he swiftly introduced her as his executive assistant, who had helped arrange for my arrival. "I have set up the blue bedroom for Elowen," she told my father. "Fresh towels in the ensuite bathroom, and I stocked the kitchen with groceries. The security team has been updated to include her in the household." My father thanked her, and she left with a friendly grin in my direction. He then took me on a tour of the house, each room more gorgeous than the last. When we arrived at my bedroom, I paused in the doorway, overwhelmed by the attention to detail. The room was painted a light blue and featured wide windows that overlooked the ocean. A sumptuous queen-sized bed dominated one wall, while a desk, bookshelf, and comfortable reading chair formed an ideal study nook near the window. But what drew my attention was the array of stuff on the dresser. "Are those—" I got closer, unable to finish the query. My father nodded with a loving expression. "Birthday and Christmas presents. Every year since I lost contact with you, I couldn't deliver them, but I couldn't bear not to buy them either." Gifts for each age group were organized chronologically. They'd been stored in their original wrapping paper. Beside them was a photo album simply titled Elowen. With trembling hands, I opened it to find the few photos my father had managed to collect of me growing up. School photos my mother must have sent during the early years after the divorce, a newspaper clipping of me receiving an academic award in 6th grade, and a blurry photo of me leaving my old school taken from a distance. "You really did try to stay in my life," I muttered, the realization setting in. "Every single day," he said, his voice hoarse and emotional. "And I am not going anywhere now if you will let me be your dad again." That first night in my new house, we had a meal delivered from a nearby restaurant because neither of us was ready to cook. The discussion flowed more smoothly as tiredness eased my guard and food replenished my energies. For the first time in years, I felt seen and heard. My opinions and feelings were valued and considered. As I finally slipped into the amazingly lovely bed in my new room, I was overcome with mental and physical tiredness. My last conscious thought before falling asleep was that perhaps being abandoned at the airport was not the death I had feared, but rather the new beginning I had always wanted. I awakened the next morning, little bewildered. The unusual comfort of the bed and the sound of waves crashing against the cliff below perplexed me. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back, and I sat up, taking in my new surroundings in the bright light of morning. The room looked much better than it did the night before. Sunlight flowed through the wide windows, creating patterns on the pale blue carpet. I ran my fingertips over the plush duvet, amazed at the contrast between this luxury and the existence I had known. After showering in the ensuite bathroom, which had a rainfall showerhead and more toiletries than I had ever possessed, I changed into yesterday's clothing and went downstairs. I discovered my father in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes with scant success. "Good morning," he murmured, looking up with an embarrassed smile and pointing to the malformed pancake in the pan. "I thought I would make breakfast, but it seems my cooking skills have not improved since you were little." The memory resurfaced unexpectedly. Sunday mornings when he attempted pancakes while my mother slept in. They were often weirdly shaped and occasionally burned, but Dad served them with pride, so I never complained. "I remember your pancakes," I murmured, settling into a stool at the kitchen island. "You used to make smiley faces with chocolate chips." His face lightened up. "You remember that? You were so young." "Some things stick with you," I said, taking the platter he gave. Despite their appearance, the pancakes tasted wonderful, and the familiarity of eating breakfast served to relieve our uneasiness together. After we ate, my father gave me a thorough tour of the house and grounds. The property was large, with groomed grounds that led down to a private beach access. Inside, the house had a home gym, a theater room, and an office with views that would make concentration hard for most people. "I have some people I would like you to meet today," he explained as we returned to the main living room. "If you feel up to it." An hour later, I was sitting across from a sophisticated woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Rowena Pike, a family law attorney. "What your mother did constitutes abandonment under the law," she stated, her tone professional but compassionate. "Leaving a minor without proper care arrangements is illegal. Additionally, there appears to be financial misconduct regarding the child support payments your father has been making." I shuffled uncomfortably in my seat. "I do not want to get my mom in trouble. I just want—" "You just want to be safe and secure," Rowena told me. "I understand, but we need to establish legal protection for you, especially if you wish to remain with your father." My father, who had been silently listening, leaned forwards. "Elowen, the choice is ultimately yours, but I want you to know that I am prepared to seek full custody if that is what you want." The thought was both horrifying and empowering. Can I really choose? "You are 15, Rowena said. "The court gives significant weight to the preferences of children your age, especially in cases involving abandonment or neglect." After the attorney had departed, my father showed me his office, where he had methodically documented every attempt to communicate with me. There were printouts of court files demanding visitation, records of unanswered phone calls to my mother, and even emails from my school that appeared to have never reached me. "She threatened legal action if I tried to contact you directly," he said, presenting me a letter from my mother's attorney from 3 years ago. "She claimed I was harassing her and causing you emotional distress." Each revelation added another piece to the puzzle, painting a picture of intentional estrangement that made my heart hurt. "Why would she do this? Just to keep you away from me?" My dad sighed. "I think it was more complicated than that. After the divorce, your mother struggled financially, which was partly my fault. I had not yet achieved success in my career. I think when the company took off and my financial situation improved dramatically, it was easier for her to maintain the narrative that I was uninvolved than to explain why she had kept us apart." My mother called 2 days after I arrived, just as I was getting used to my new routine with my father. I glanced at her name on my phone screen, a storm of emotions paralyzing me temporarily. "You don't have to answer," my father remarked gently, seeing my concern. After 4 rings, the phone went to voicemail. A minute later, a notification flashed, suggesting that she had left a message. With shaky fingers, I hit play and placed the phone on speaker. "Elowen, honey, there appears to have been a terrible misunderstanding." My mother's voice rose, deceptively bright. "I thought you understood the plan was for you to stay home during our trip. Cassian felt it would be good for you to have some independence, and I agreed. I did not abandon you, sweetie. That is such a harsh word. Call me back so we can clear this up. The resort Wi-Fi is spotty, but I will try to check my messages. Love you." The blatant distortion of reality made my stomach turn, There was no plan for me to stay at home, and no discussion about independence. She had abandoned me unexpectedly and was now attempting to gaslight me into disbelieving my own experience. Classic, my father muttered while shaking his head. She has not changed at all. I chose not to return the call. Instead, with Rowena Pike's and my father's backing, I decided to stay in Seattle permanently. The attorney started the process of filing for a change of custody by gathering evidence of my mother's abandonment and financial malfeasance. With the urgent legal issues in hand, my father turned his focus to practical problems. You need clothes, school supplies, whatever personal items you want, he told me. We can go shopping today if you feel up to it. The shopping experience was weird. My father's insistence that I chose whatever I wanted without checking price tags overwhelmed me, as I was used to thrift stores and clearance racks. By the end of the day I had a new clothes, a laptop for homework, and a phone with unlimited data. A stark contrast to the restrictive plan my mother had reluctantly granted. That evening, while sitting on the terrace facing the beach, my father and I had our first truly in-depth chat regarding the divorce and the years of separation. Why did you and Mom split up? I said, finally giving voice to a topic that had tortured me since I was 8 years old. He remained quiet for a long time, gathering his thoughts. The simplest answer is that we wanted different things from life. Your mother wanted financial security and social status above all else. When my first business venture failed, she saw me as a disappointment rather than a partner facing temporary setbacks. And you? I asked. I wanted a true partnership. Someone who would weather the storms with me, not abandon ship at the first sign of rough waters. He glanced at me with a mournful expression. I never wanted to leave you, Elowen. That was the hardest part. Your mother used her custody rights as a weapon, gradually restricting my access until I was effectively cut out of your life. As the days passed, we discussed my future. My father contacted the premier private school in Seattle and made arrangements for me to begin classes in the autumn term. A child psychologist was hired to assist me deal with the abandonment and years of manipulation. Slowly, I began to imagine a world in which I was loved and supported rather than simply tolerated. 1 week after I arrived in Seattle, my father and Rowena Pike proposed that I remove my possessions from my mother's residence. With her still in Bali for another week, we had the ideal opportunity to enter the property legally, as I was still a resident, and retrieve my personal belongings without incident. You do not have to come if it would be too difficult, my dad informed me. I can handle it with the legal team. But I knew I had to do it myself as a crucial step in closing this chapter of my life. I want to go, I stated firmly. There are things there that matter to me. After making our decision, we meticulously planned the vacation. Flights were scheduled, legal documentation were drafted, and a moving company was hired to transport my possessions. As the date arrived, I found myself penning and redrafting a letter to leave for my mother, attempting to explain the severity of her betrayal and my resolve to forge a new path. 3 days before my mother was due to return from Bali, my father and I arrived at the house I lived with my mother and Cassian's family, joined by Rowena Pike and her assistant. I entered the front door with my key and found the house just as it had been left, eerily silent and untouched. Walking into that environment as a tourist was confusing. Familiar surroundings suddenly felt unfamiliar, as if I were viewing them through fresh eyes. For the first time, I realized that the images on the walls were largely of Cassian and his children, with my mother appearing infrequently. There were almost no images of me, and none of me with my mother. "Where is your room?" my father inquired calmly, placing his hand on my shoulder to reassure me. I brought him upstairs to the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall, farthest from the master suite. Opening the door revealed my little space, clean but impersonal, devoid of the pampering apparent in the stepchildren's quarters we had passed. "This was your room?" my father asked, his voice full of amazement as he noticed the simple furnishings and lack of decorations. "It is fine," I answered instinctively, the protective response imprinted from years of being instructed to be grateful for what I had. His expression softened. "No, sweetheart. It is not fine. You deserved better." With the help of the movers, we started packing my possessions. Clothes were placed in wardrobe boxes, while books and school materials were packed in smaller cartons. I was picky about what I took, leaving behind anything that had been a gift from my mother or Cassian, and only taking what actually belonged to me or had sentimental worth. As I emptied my desk drawers, I discovered a box of treasures that I had almost forgotten, shoved to the back of the bottom drawer. The photographs inside were from before the divorce. My father had sent me a few birthday cards in the early years after our separation, as well as a small teddy bear for my 5th birthday. "You kept these," he exclaimed, his voice full with passion as I gave him the souvenirs. I never really believed she was telling the truth about you not caring, I told her. Not completely. In my closet, beneath a rack of shoes, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A stack of envelopes tied with a rubber band and addressed to me in my father's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened the first one to discover a birthday card for my 13th birthday with a lovely inscription and a gift card that had never been used. I examined the envelopes one by one, each providing evidence of my father's ongoing efforts to remain in my life. My mother had carefully kept her efforts secret from me. Cards for each birthday and Christmas. A letter revealing his new address and phone number after moving to Seattle. Photos of him at his corporate headquarters, with a note expressing his desire that I might visit someday. She kept all of these from me, I said quietly, tears flowing down my cheeks. All this time, I thought you had forgotten about me. My father drew me into a close hug. Never. Not for a single day. As the movers resumed their work, I strolled inside my mother's home office, motivated by a need to understand why she had gone to such great pains to isolate me from my father. Rowena had told me that personal records linked to me were legally mine to keep, so I started looking through the filing cabinet. In the divorce folder, I saw financial papers that supported what my father had told me. Monthly child support payments, considerably exceeding what my mother claimed to receive, were transferred on a regular basis into an account I had no idea existed. There were also court paperwork demonstrating my father's repeated requests for visitation, which were all denied by my mother using various bogus grounds. The most damning evidence was a draft letter to her attorney, dated around the time Mother met Cassian, outlining a plan to reduce my father's influence as she integrated into her new partner's life. I was referred to as a complication that needed to be properly managed to keep Cassian's interest. By late afternoon, the packing was done. As the movers carried the last of the boxes onto their truck, I sat at my now empty desk and penned the letter I'd been thinking about for days. Dear Mom, it began. The formality of mother felt too remote, and the tenderness of mommy seemed impossible to reach. I expressed my sentiments of betrayal, not only from the airport abandonment, but also from years of being treated as a nuisance. I said that I had discovered the concealed letters and financial records, and that I knew the truth about her methodical attempt to keep my father from me. I am choosing to live with Dad now, I said near the end. Not as revenge, but because I deserve to be somewhere I am wanted and valued. I hope someday you will understand the damage your choices have caused, not just to me, but to yourself. Despite everything, I do not hate you. But I need to love myself enough to leave. I laid the letter on the naked mattress of what had been my bed, the white paper standing out against the bare blue sheet. Finally, I left the home key alongside it as a mark of my departure from this household. Walking out of that house for the final time, I felt a mixed mix of loss, relief, and resolution. My father waited near the car, his expression anxious. All done? He inquired. I nodded, unable to speak with the lump in my throat. He appeared to understand, opening the car door for me without more explanation. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house. Instead, I looked ahead, at the future I could now construct. My mother returned from Bali 3 days later. Within hours, my phone was inundated with notifications, an onslaught of increasingly urgent texts. Where are you? Why is your room empty? Call me immediately. Elowen, this is not funny. Come home right now. I just spoke to your father's lawyer. How could you do this to me after everything I have done for you? Please come home, sweetie. We can work this out. I miss you. The texts followed a familiar pattern of wrath, manipulation, and feigned contrition. I showed them to my father and Rowena, who encouraged me not to answer until the legal proceedings were further advanced. A week after her return, my mother arrived unannounced at my father's house, having somehow discovered the address. The security system notified us of her presence at the gate, with her expensive SUV visible on the monitor while she repeatedly hit the intercom button. You do not have to see her, my father informed me. We can have security turn her away. But I knew this meeting was unavoidable and possibly essential. I will talk to her, I responded firmly. But I want you and Rowena there too. When the front door opened, my mother's face was a study in mixed emotions. Relief at finding me and indignation at the circumstances. She wore an expensive sundress and fashionable sunglasses pushed up into her nicely highlighted hair, the epitome of affluent suburbia. Elowen, thank God, she exclaimed, moving up to embrace me. I took an instinctual step back, and her arms fell to her sides. What is going on? Why did you leave? Why are you with him? The final phrase was so venomous that I flinched. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, Rowena said. My father had sent me a few birthday cards in the early years after our separation, as well as a small teddy bear for my 5th birthday. You kept these, he exclaimed, his voice full of passion as I gave him the mementos. I never really believed she was telling the truth about you not caring, I told her. Not totally. In my closet, beneath a rack of shoes, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A stack of envelopes tied with a rubber band and addressed to me in my father's handwriting. With trembling hands I opened the first envelope to find a birthday card for my 13th birthday, containing a heartfelt message and a gift card that had never been used. One by one, I opened the envelopes, each containing evidence of my father's continued efforts to remain in my life, efforts that my mother had purposefully hidden from me. Cards for every birthday and Christmas, a letter explaining his new address and phone number when he moved to Seattle, photos of him at his company. I muttered, tears flowing down my cheeks. All this time, I thought you had forgotten about me. My father drew me into a tight embrace. Never, not for a single day. As the movers continued their work, I wandered into my mother's home office, drawn by a need to understand why she had gone to such lengths to separate me from my father. Rowena had advised that personal documents related to me were legally mine to take, so I began searching through the filing cabinet. In a folder labeled Divorce, I found financial records that confirmed what my father had told me. Monthly child support payments, far larger than what my mother had claimed. There were also court documents showing my father's repeated petitions for visitation, all of which were opposed by my mother with various fabricated excuses. The most damning of all was a draft of a letter to her attorney, dated around the time she met Cassian, outlining a strategy to minimize the father's influence as she integrated into her new partner's life. I was referred to as a complication that needed to be carefully managed to ensure Cassian's ongoing interest. By late afternoon, the packing was finished, and as the movers loaded the last of the boxes into their truck, I sat at my now empty desk and wrote the letter I'd been thinking about for days. Dear Mom, it began, the formality of mother feeling too distant, the warmth of mommy impossibly out of reach. I poured out my feelings of betrayal, not just from the airport abandonment, but from years of being treated as an inconvenience. I explained that I had found the hidden letters and financial records, that I knew the truth about her systematic campaign to keep my father from me. I am choosing to live with Dad now, I wrote near the conclusion, not as payback, but because I deserve to be somewhere I am loved and cherished. I hope someday you will comprehend the damage your actions have caused, not only to me, but also to yourself. Despite everything, I don't detest you. But I have to love myself enough to leave. I laid the letter on the stripped mattress of what had once been my bed, the white paper standing out against the bare blue sheet, and as a finishing touch, I left the house key beside it, symbolizing my departure from this family. Walking out of that house for the last time, I felt a strange combination of loss, relief, and resolution. My father waited by the car, his look anxious. Is everything done? He asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat, and he seemed to understand, opening the car door for me without further inquiries. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house. Instead, I focused on the future I was now free to make. My mother returned from Bali 3 days later, and within hours, my phone was inundated with notifications, a barrage of increasingly urgent messages. Where are you? Why is your room empty? Please call me quickly. Alawan, this isn't funny. Come home immediately. I just spoke with your father's lawyer. How could you do this to me after all I've done for you? Please come home, sweetheart. We can work it out. I miss you. I showed the text to my father and Rowena, who urged me not to answer until the legal proceedings had progressed. The communications followed a predictable pattern of fury, manipulation, and feigned contrition. A week after her return, my mother arrived unannounced to my father's house, having somehow found the location. The security system alerted us to her presence at the gate, and her luxurious SUV was visible on the monitor as she repeatedly punched the intercom button. You do not have to see her, my father informed me. We can have security turn her away. But I knew this meeting was unavoidable and possibly essential. I will talk to her, but I want you and Rowena there too. When the front door opened, my mother's face was a study in conflicting emotions. Joy at finding me, and indignation at the circumstances. She wore an expensive sundress and designer sunglasses pushed up over her nicely highlighted hair, the picture of affluent suburbia. Alawan, thank God, she exclaimed, moving up to embrace me. I took an instinctual step back and her arms fell to her sides. What's going on? Why did you leave? Why are you with him? The last word was so venomous that I flinched. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside. My father proposed, his voice calm but forceful. Once sat in the living room, with Rowena as both legal counsel and witness, my mother's veneer began to shatter. Her gaze darted over the lovely space, soaking in the obvious riches and taste visible in every detail. "So this is what this is about," she exclaimed with a brittle laugh. "He enticed you away with promises of luxury. I should have known." "That is not why I am here," I said, attempting to keep my voice calm. "I am here because you left me at an airport. I came here because you have been lying to me about Dad for years. I'm here because I discovered all the letters and cards you hid from me." Her expression faltered and then stiffened. "You went through my private belongings. How dare you?" "They were addressed to me," I said. "They were mine to read." "You are 15 years old," she snapped. "And everything under my roof, including your correspondence, belongs to me. I was protecting you from his inconsistency and broken promises." My father, who had been quietly observing, eventually spoke. "Vivienne, there were no broken promises. Only your relentless attempts to remove me from our daughter's life." "You have no right to judge me," she said. "You have no idea what it was like raising her alone while you were off becoming a millionaire." "I sent child support every month," he said evenly. "Much more than the court required. You appear to have spent money on yourself while telling Aloan you were struggling." My mom's face reddened. "That's a lie. I gave up everything for her, even dumping her at an airport so you could go on vacation with your new family." Rowena intervened, her professional tone making the charge even more damning, and my mother seemed at a loss for words for a moment before narrowing her eyes and returning her gaze to me. "I have not abandoned you. I offered you the possibility for independence. If you had simply gone home as instructed, none of this drama would have occurred." The brazen distortion of truth made my chest tighten with rage. "You abandoned me at a foreign airport with $200 and no house key. You didn't tell me to go until you were walking away. You did not respond to my calls or SMS. How is that an opportunity?" "You are twisting what happened," she insisted, her voice losing some confidence. My father leaned forwards. "Vivienne, we have security footage from the airport. We have witness statements from airline employees. And we have the text messages you sent Elowen after the fact, attempting to conceal your tracks." My mother's face lost its color. "You're developing a case against me. You want to take my kid and throw me in jail, after everything we've done for one another." "This is not about punishment," Rowena emphasized. "It is about determining what is best for Elowen going forward. She has clearly stated a desire to live with her father, and given the circumstances, the court is very likely to grant her demand." My mother's composure cracked completely, tears flowing down her cheeks as she turned to me. "Elowen, please. I made an error. I was mistaken. But you can't leave me for him. We're a family." "We stopped being a family when you decided Cassian and his children were more important than me," I quietly murmured. "Maybe even before that, when you started lying about Dad." "It was not like that," she said faintly. "So what was it like?" I said. "Help me understand why you would hide Dad's letters, lie about child support, and then ditch me for a vacation." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, seemingly unable to create a rationale even she could believe. Finally, she whispered, "Cassian thought it would be best if you stayed at home. He stated that the resort was primarily for adults and his children, who were accustomed to that lifestyle. I was afraid of losing him." The direct honesty was more hurtful than her previous attempts at manipulation. "So, you chose him over me?" "I chose financial security," she replied. "Do you know what it's like to be a single mother without money? Cassian promised us a better life." "He offered you a better life," I responded. "I was just excess baggage." Before she could react, the front door opened and Cassian walked in, his face tense with rage. "Vivienne, this has lasted long enough. Get in the car now." My father rose immediately. "How did you get through security?" Cassian ignored him and focused on my mother. "I said not to come here. You're simply making things worse. Our lawyer told us not to make any contact." My mother appeared to shrink beneath his stare, her fleeting moment of honesty fading as she reverted to the obedient wife. "I just wanted to see Alowen." "And now that you have," he remarked dismissively. "Let us go." My mother stood to follow him, and I yelled after her. "Do you truly want this, Mom? Someone who treats you like a child and considers me an inconvenience?" She halted, her countenance conflicted, but Cassian firmly grasped her elbow. "The car, Vivienne. Now." The last sight I had of my mother that day was her back as she walked away, exactly like at the airport, except this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. In the aftermath of that confrontation, my father's legal team filed for a restraining order after Cassian attempted to enter the property again the next day. The court granted the order, and a temporary custody arrangement was put in place pending a full hearing. The most difficult part was accepting that my mother had chosen her new life over me. Not just once at the airport, but repeatedly over the years with each hidden letter and lie about my father. The girl who had once felt she was the center of her mother's existence had to face the awful fact that she had been, at best, an afterthought. The months that followed my mother's dramatic visit were difficult but transforming. My weekly sessions with Dr. Cressida Hale, a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma and parental abandonment, provided a safe space for me to process the complex emotions surrounding my mother's betrayal and years of manipulation. Creating new routines, establishing boundaries, and learning to trust that his presence in my life was permanent were all part of the adjustment process. "What you are feeling is entirely normal," Dr. Hale assured me during one especially painful session. "Anger, grief, relief, guilt, all of these can coexist. Healing isn't a linear process." With her coaching, I began to see that my mother's behaviors reflected her own brokenness rather than my worth. While this insight did not excuse what she had done, it did help me bear the load with less self-blame. "People who are whole do not abandon their children," the doctor said. "Your mother's choices speak to her limitations, not yours." My father enrolled me in Westlake Academy, one of Seattle's premier private schools, for my sophomore year, and the transition was both exciting and intimidating. After years of being the outsider in Cassian's home, I was wary of making new connections, but to my surprise, I found myself making genuine friends for the first time in years. Leora and Evren, twins who shared my love of literature, welcomed me into their friend group with an ease that felt almost suspicious at first. Juniper, a gifted artist who recognized my tentative attempts at sketching, offered to teach me proper techniques during lunch periods. I gradually began to lower my defenses, allowing these new friends glimpses of my true self. "You are different from when you first came here," Leora said one afternoon as we walked home from school. "Less guarded." "I guess I am learning that not everyone has an agenda," I said, surprised by my own realization. Developing a relationship with my father was a delicate dance of rediscovery. We were getting to know each other as we were now, while also reconciling memories of who we had been. Sometimes the past and present were perfectly aligned, such as when he remembered my childhood love of stargazing and installed a telescope on the deck. Other times, the years of separation created unexpected gaps, moments of disconnect that reminded us of everything we had missed. "I wish I could have been there for your first day of middle school," he said one evening as we looked at photos I had brought from my mother's house. "Your science fair projects, your first crush." "We cannot get those years back," I told him, surprised at the role reversal, me soothing him. "But we have now and the future." He squeezed my hand, his eyes unsettlingly bright. "When did you become so wise?" "Trauma has its benefits," I remarked, the dark humor a symptom of my ongoing recovery. After Rowena presented the overwhelming evidence of abandonment and financial misconduct, the judge ordered my mother to repay the misappropriated child support funds and established a structured visitation schedule that would begin only after I was compensated. The court granted my father full legal custody 6 months after I moved in with him. My mother, who was represented by an expensive attorney Cassian had hired, initially opposed the decision, but eventually agreed to it. It was more care than she deserved in my opinion, but my father gently reminded me that having a relationship with her could be beneficial to my long-term emotional health. "You can be angry with her, even hate what she did, without severing the connection completely," he urged. "But the choice is ultimately yours. I will support whatever decision you make." My mother's narrative had shifted from denying abandonment to framing it as a misguided attempt to please Cassian, as if that somehow made it less damaging. Even though the first few sessions were excruciating, she alternated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to justify her actions. "I just wanted us to have security," she said repeatedly. "So you made sure I ended up alone at an airport instead," I said during one very stressful session. Over time, I established firm boundaries with my mother. I would not return to live with her despite promises or emotional appeals. I would not pretend the past did not exist, and I would not allow her to rewrite our history to relieve her guilt. These terms were non-negotiable, and she gradually seemed to accept them. My father remained unusually impartial during this process, never speaking ill of my mother despite everything she had done. When I confronted him about this restraint, his response stuck with me. "Hating her will only damage you," he said. You are half her whether we like it or not. Besides, she gave me you, so I can forgive practically anything. My first holiday season with my father and his extended family, grandparents and cousins I barely remembered, was a revelation. The genuine warmth and inclusion I experienced stood in stark contrast to the performative family dinners at Cassian's house, where I had always felt like an unwanted guest. My paternal grandma, a vivacious woman in her 70s, approached me at Christmas dinner. "You have your father's perseverance," she told me, her eyes crinkling with love, "and his heart. But that spark, that fire when you talk about things that are important to you, that is uniquely yours." 3 years later they graduated from high school. My father was beaming with pride as I delivered the valedictorian address, and my mother sat awkwardly in the row behind my father and his parents. Our relationship had evolved into something cordial, if not close, based on careful honesty rather than the false harmony she preferred. In college I moved to the East Coast to pursue a degree in psychology with a minor in family law. The distance from both parents allowed me to define myself beyond the dynamics of their divorce and the drama of my adolescence. I discovered passions and strengths that I might not have recognized if my life had continued on its previous path. In my junior year, I interned with a nonprofit organization that helps children of divorce, and I used my experience to help others navigate similar challenges. This work eventually led to my career path, which is to develop programs for family courts to better consider children's needs during custody proceedings. The journey to forgiveness was long and non-linear. Some days, the memory of my mother's casual shrug as she abandoned me at the airport still had the power to steal my breath. On other days, I could acknowledge her humanity, flaws, and limited capacity with compassion rather than bitterness. My therapist had explained years ago that forgiveness does not mean that what happened was okay. On my 25th birthday, I wrote my mother a letter expressing my hard-earned understanding that people can only give what they have within themselves. I wrote, "Your capacity for unconditional love was damaged long before I came along. Recognizing this has freed me from anticipating something you can never deliver." Her response was surprisingly self-aware. "You deserved better than what I could be as a mother," she wrote back. "I am sorry for that, every day." When I married at 28, my father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. "From the moment you called me from that airport, all I wanted was to see you happy and whole," he whispered before handing me over to my soon-to-be husband. "Look at you now." My mother attended the wedding with her new companion, Cassian, who was long gone after their final divorce. She participated correctly, but without seeking to take credit for the lady I had become, a restraint that represented her own maturation over time. My mother taught me the value of self-sufficiency and the dangers of prioritizing status over genuine connection, while my father taught me the patient perseverance of true love and the courage to start over after a loss. These lessons served as a roadmap for me as I started my own family. The airport abandonment, which previously defined me, gradually became simply one chapter in a much longer journey, a critical point, but not the finish. In an unexpected way, being left behind spurred me ahead, forcing me to discover strengths I may not have discovered otherwise. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if my mother had taken me to Bali that day, if she had chosen me over Cassian's preferences. Would I still be stuck in the cycle of seeking her conditional approval? Would I have discovered my father's unwavering love? Would I have found my voice and purpose? Of course, these questions have no answers. My father taught me that families are defined not by biology or legal documents, but by a consistent choice to show up, value, and prioritize one another. In her absence, my mother confirmed this. If you have ever felt abandoned or betrayed by someone who should have protected you, you know that their failure does not determine your worth. Family can be found and created in unexpected places if you remain open to connection, even after heartbreak. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care and best wishes.